Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I'm Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about American Gods Season 1, Episode 3. It's called Head Full of Snow. Full spoilers for the episode, as always. Other second disclaimer that I'm going to start putting in for this one, just so that it's clear at the start of each episode. Connor has read the book. I have not. He will keep his spoilers to himself. And so, obviously not spoilers for the show, spoilers from the book for later episodes of the show. So,
Yes.
so we'll get into it. So like the last couple, this opened with an introduction to a god.
It was a bit different though, because the last two were coming to America, and the middle section was a somewhere in America, whereas this one opened with a somewhere in America.
Yeah, this was a family who were already here, but because she learned about the gods of Egypt growing up, and because she remembered them, it was actually the was it Anubis who showed up
Yes.
and was basically acting as her Grim Reaper, as it were, and probably one of my favourite shots of the whole episode, actually, where they go out into the fire escape and they're climbing up, and it keeps going, but my favourite part of it was when it was like the bricks of the building ended and it became like different bricks. It became this older sort of sandstone kind of.
Yeah, and then it becomes like the desert.
Yeah. And the desert stuff was fine, but it was that one shot of the
Yeah,
stairs
yeah.
going up, but the bricks and the stairs changed to the new thing. I
It was
like
nice
that.
because it was just a gradual shift, wasn't it?
Yeah. And she has the whole thing with the scale, with the white feather and all that. And
Yeah.
she chooses her thing. And all of it's really to introduce us to the god more than it is about her, but it plays like this sort of simple little short film, just sort of teaching you about
Yeah.
one of these gods. It's
And
fun.
the cat that's with it, I assume, is Basta, who's another Greek, not Greek, Egyptian goddess who is, a cat goddess, and her thing was protection and family. So that
Okay.
kind of lines up.
She pushes her in the door.
Yeah, exactly.
As you do. It's funny though, because obviously these episodes are like a full hour long,
Hmm.
and I think it's really curious that with each one so far, because I actually checked the time, and when the first segment ended, I checked, what time are we at? I want to see how much of the episode this takes up, and we were exactly 10 minutes in to the
Okay.
episode. So it's almost like we have a 50-minute episode, but like we have these little short films at the start.
You say that, we have the one in the middle. I think that one's about 10, 15 minutes in this episode.
Yeah, yeah.
It's quite a long one, it felt like.
That's true. If I have a complaint, I guess, is that it is these plots in the middle, because it was with Bilquis in the last couple, but they seem so separate. I mean, I know we did get a glimpse of the one of the guys from this story in the last episode, but they are so on their own right now.
They are at the minute, yeah. I'm
Yeah,
I'm hoping they tie in sooner rather than later.
yeah. Everything feels, and the openings as well feel very separate. I'm letting it away with them a bit more so right now, just because they do feel like a separate thing at the start, and it feels like they're introducing each god as it
Yeah,
goes.
yeah. Whereas when you cut away from your story, it
Yeah.
feels more jarring.
Because in actual fact, when I was looking at this episode when it ended, it really sort of stuck out to me how segmented it was. Because the stuff with Shadow Moon and everything he was doing with Mr. Wednesday, that was just essentially two chunks. There was like
Yeah, yeah. Either side of that middle
yeah,
bit.
and that was kind of it. Obviously, there was a subplot as well with what's the Irish dude's name, Mad Sweeney.
Yes.
He had his own little subplot as well. He feels more connected though because he's interacted with the characters. He then interacted again with our main characters, so that feels more like an actual subplot in an episode as opposed to this completely separate short film almost in the middle.
No, I agree.
Let's jump to that since we're talking about it. That this show apparently has a thing for giant cocks because this is now the second big cock we've had in 3 episodes. This was a story of Salim, who's a salesman, and um, a Jinn, who's a cab driver.
Yes.
And they appear to swap places by the end of the story. But the salesman goes for a meeting. He's trying to sell stuff to this businessman, and he never gets seen. When he gets into the cab, he talks about how he's been in America for a week, and all it's done is eat his money, and like he feels basically helpless and alone, and everything's just so empty.
Yeah.
And the Jinn, who we see his eyes are sort of glowing, which is a really cool effect actually. And
Yeah.
we get a sense that he's also kind of lost because his purpose as a Jinn feels meaningless right now.
Mm.
So they basically he goes up to his room and they have this love scene, very very erotic, very kind of. Oh, it was almost reminiscent of the Bilquis stuff in the last couple of episodes, just without the. Obviously, it went in a different place, but
See, I don't know. I think you hit the nail already when you said this was a love scene and not a sex scene. Whereas
Oh,
Twist was
sure.
a sex scene, it was all about the lust. Whereas this was about the connection.
What I mean, though, I mean in terms of the just how graphic it was.
Yeah. Okay.
Like it wasn't pulling punches.
Yeah.
So I guess what I mean is it still felt like a Starz sex scene.
Sure. There's going to be one in every episode.
Yeah, that's really what I mean by that. And yeah, they weren't pulling, and it was more romantic, I guess, to use the term, because it felt more. Even though the Jin was definitely being the dominant party of the scene, it felt more receptive, especially
Yeah, it felt like a mutual thing, didn't it?
yeah.
Whereas with Quist, it was like, no, you're clearly just here
It was a
to
trick.
make me better. Yeah.
Yeah, with her it was a trick, whereas here it's not. Here, like the Jin's almost reluctant, and he's like, "No, you do grant wishes. Like this happening is a wish being granted, all kind of thing almost." And obviously at the end, even more so when they've kind of swapped places, and he gets to go be the cab driver. He gets to have a steady job, which is kind of what he wanted. He was sick of this uncertainty of his life.
Yeah.
Obviously, the highlight is when it kind of transcends, and like they feel that they're in the desert, and they're both got glowing eyes, and
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's not that they have glowing eyes first. It's the fire of the Jinn literally goes
yeah,
through
yeah.
his body and goes up him and then into his eyes. That's a fantastic visual.
Yeah, I mean the visuals. Obviously, I think are the big thing for me in this episode was a lot of stuff between the opening thing going up the stairs, here with the Jin sex scene, and then all the stuff with the weather, which obviously is a big part of this episode. The visuals when we first get to Shadow Moon, and before he plays checkers again, he goes up and meets the third sister. I
Yes.
won't say her name because even he has a joke where he tries to say it, and he's like, you're the sister who was asleep. Yeah, you're that one."
Yeah, yeah,
And they have this weird scene where she speaks in a very ominous manner, very, very cryptically hinting at things but without actually saying stuff. She talks about a bear who's in the stars who's being trapped. Am I understanding this right?
yeah. I mean, it's the idea of there is a force, that they're fighting against.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But is that all the gods? Or is that just one side of the gods?
Uh,
Is that
it,
Wednesday's side or is it the other side? Is it both sides don't want the thing to be loose?
I mean, I don't think that's clear right now because we don't know the
But
motivations.
you know it, okay. But based on the show, I don't know. Okay, right. All right, okay. But the visuals of that, because it was the storm itself was like it created this big circle where you
Yeah, it
could
was
see
gorgeous,
through
wasn't it?
So the rest of the city was in a storm, but there was just this circle in the middle where they were looking through.
Yeah.
And the idea that she has a shift where she is watching this thing and sort of monitoring it,
Yeah,
guarding it
yeah, and she
almost.
implies that they all have the shift because that's
Yeah.
the whole deal with the sisters is that there's like a morning, an evening, and a midnight. She's the midnight sister, obviously.
Yeah.
So obviously they'll take it in turns.
And she does this, and again, it kind of wakes up after this as if it was a dream, even though we know it kind of still happened. It's kind of this weird,
Yeah, it's middle ground, isn't it?
yeah. But she gives him the moon. So she grabs the moon and then gives it to him as if it's a coin, which again ties into the whole symbolism of the coin of Mad Sweeney from before.
Which she mentions how he had the protection of the sun. Now you have the moon. I think the coin from Mad Sweeney is the sun because obviously that was bright. It was
Yeah.
like life. It was gold, whereas this was a silver coin. It was like the moon. So
Yeah.
I imagine that's what that was.
No, but we've also speculated, or at least I've speculated, but I've speculated that Shadow Moon's more. There's more to him than just being human. There's more to him based on how he survived the end of the first episode. Hence, that he is more important than that. Now, obviously, later on in this episode, Wednesday's whole thing is, all right, we're going to rob a bank. Think of snow. And as soon as he said that, it did occur to me that the storm passed in the morning when he woke up, and he made a point of saying, "Oh, the storm has passed," and he's like, not really," or "No, it's not."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Oh wait, was he responsible for that storm? Was it his clouded mind, because he thinks he's going to get killed in the morning at that point? Is that him his
It's
mind?
a reflection of his mental
yeah,
state. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm like, all right. So and clearly, obviously, the rest of the episode, he thinks of snow. He thinks of it repeatedly, and then eventually he looks out the window and there's snow. To the point where Mr. Wednesday says, "Yeah, stop thinking about snow. We don't want to demobilize the city."
Yeah, that's one of my favorite moments. It's straight from the book. It's just it's one of those moments where it's like, oh, okay, it's that moment where the shadow starts believing.
Yeah.
I think.
Even then, I think he's still been very doubtful. But it's the first sort of proof. It's the
Yeah,
first.
yeah. It's the first moment. It's the step to belief. That
Yeah.
that first step of the journey, where all this stuff before, like say he's been doubting it. He's like, nah, it's a delusion.
Yeah, he
That's the
thinks he's going
whole
crazy.
episode,
Yeah, media last episode, he thinks, oh, I'm going crazy. I'm seeing people on TVs.
right? Whereas this, it's like this beautiful moment where all of a sudden there is snow, and it's like, hang on, he's like, is this
Well,
real?
that's what makes it.
And maybe
Because the beautiful moment for me is when he steps outside and he's actually standing in the snow.
yeah.
It was kind of the same actually. Earlier on, it went into like slow motion with the rain.
Yeah, do you know what? I love how the rain looks on this show. It's been a couple of times. It wasn't just in this episode, but it's got this really different effect to what I normally think of as rain on film.
Yes, I wonder. It could be like a CG thing where they're tampering with it. It could just be the type of like rain they're using with how they're lighting it to make
It
it
could
look
be, yeah.
really. Because obviously one of the little sort of tidbits that people might not know with shooting rain on film is quite often you'll notice sometimes when you watch a scene in like I notice it on TV all the time. I think in this last week's Flash, for example, I noticed that one of the scenes just you could tell it was kind of raining in the background, but it doesn't actually look that prominent. You kind of get away with it, and you almost never notice because rain, actual real rain, doesn't show up that well on the camera
Yeah, unless it's like a storm.
unless it's like a proper storm because it's quite light. The camera just doesn't really pick it up. So when they actually shoot a scene in a movie with rain, is they have to usually they're artificial showers where they're pumping rain at them themselves to make it heavier because that's how it shows up. So I'm wondering if it's just a case of like how they're doing that and how they're lighting it.
Yeah, I think it probably is. Like, it just looks a bit heavier, maybe, but more defined. I don't know. But I really like how it looks. And I thought the same with the snow as well at the end. Just it's very defined, each flake.
Yeah, yeah. I enjoyed the stuff with weather. Like I say, because the middle part seems so separate, and because it does come in the middle before we get to the main kind of gist of the episode. Because obviously there's the whole thing with the checkers again, and he makes a new bet where, all right, you can still kill me at the end of this, but it's not until after we've done everything that Mr. Wednesday's planning. But if you win, you can bash me twice in the morning because you maybe because he sort of insults his effectiveness. He's like, you might a bit old and rusty. You might not kill me in the first blow.
It's a prod to his pride, isn't
Yeah.
it? That kind of motivates him.
And you can see it in the acting as well. As soon as he says that, you get this close up.
And his eyes just kind of shift.
Yeah, and he's like, it's like, oh, shit's real now. It's like he's on,
Yeah.
and that kind of sets that up. And but it gets, but I think because it cuts away from that to this big long, even though that long scene of the gin was interesting, it was a completely new thing again. And I feel like that so far this show, every episode there's at least two chunks of it where it's like a completely new thing, and I'm like, oh wait, okay, I'm just getting my footing on whatever, new thing again. And because it didn't get to the gist of the episode yet, I did feel like it took a long time for me to kind of like, or what is this episode of this show?
I get that. I think the reality is, like you say, there is so much going on. That's probably why they're drip feeding it like that, so you're not completely overwhelmed.
I think I'm just speaking from a structure of an episode, of this what particular episode. I didn't feel like I knew what the episode was about until really late on.
Yeah, because the first part was kind of just a bit of a journey again.
Yeah, bit of a journey, and then the checkers thing felt like it was just dealing with the aftermath of the last episode for the most part.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until we had the bank heist and like setting up the bank heist and all that stuff where I felt like, okay, right, this is kind of what the episode's getting at. But like, so as much as I don't think it's kind of a pacing issue, I suppose, in a weird way. Even though I don't think it's slow paced, it's just kind of like, as a complete package, as an episode, it felt like it was very segmented, and as a result, I felt like I was kind of like waiting for it to get to the point.
No, I agree with that. You can feel where it shifts to each different thing. It's like, okay, so this is the aftermath, this is our middle, side story. Now here's the rest of this episode, and we'll do what this episode is.
Yeah, it's lacking a bit of flow, I guess, at least for this episode.
Yeah, I don't think I haven't really felt it in the previous two, because I think the stories before and after the middle scene were more connected, whereas this felt like there was a clear divide.
Yeah.
Between even what city they were in for the most part. So I just feel like it does segment it a bit more in this one.
Yeah. Obviously, Mad Sweeney's plot. He realises he doesn't have his coin. He's having a bit of bad luck.
Yeah.
Pardon me. He's having a bit of bad luck, and he Because he's like, no, that shotgun's not going to go off, and then it goes off. And actually, I like the little touch that the bit of glass sticks in his cheek,
Yeah.
just to make it especially gruesome.
He looks so angry.
Yeah, and then he's walking along the road, and this pleasant guy who's a recovering alcoholic who's been sober for 12 years, I think he said, lets him in his car, and he tries to be really nice, and he's like, no, I used to be kind of like where at least where he thinks he is, assuming he's just a drunk like he was. And he tries to be helpful, tries to be nice, and then immediately this truck carrying like pipes like stumbles and hits at something, and the pipe comes flying through the windshield in a gloriously brutal death.
Oh, it is beautiful.
But it's after this he's like, I'm having really bad luck, and he looks through his coins and he's trying to get into his coins, like, oh crap. And he ends up showing up with the others later on. He's like, hey, you've got my coin, with some spectacular foul language, might I add, which I'm not going to repeat.
Yep.
But the use of the C-bomb
I approve strongly.
was amusing. But yeah, so he's like, oh yeah, I like how Shadow doesn't even like sugarcoat. He's like, oh yeah, so it's on my wife's grave, which leads to obviously Mad Sweeney making a dig at his wife and like, oh, I'm just the next in a long line of men to climb on top of your dead wife, being very provocative with his tact, shall we say? Yeah. Which of course leads to the end of the episode where he goes to the grave, he's digging it up, and he
gets there very quick, I might add. I don't know if there's some sort of trickery involved, or if he's just, and maybe there's a tangent we didn't see, I don't know. I can't tell with this show.
Well, I don't know, it depends how long Shadow and Wednesday were driving at the end, because they're driving at the end when they're talking, because that obviously to kind of wrap up the whole thing, going back to this is the first time that he's kind of believing something, is Wednesday says, when you look back in this day, later, years from now, you tend to remember the things that are important, and the first thing that's probably going to pop into your head about today is snow, because that was the moment of like faith that you almost got there for a second. Also, I like their talk about all the Jesus stuff.
Yeah, and it's really becoming clear. Even Wednesday tells us how he's the only thing he's afraid of is people forgetting him, and it's kind of really setting up the idea of the belief in the gods.
There was just something really funny about the conversation though, where he's like. Because he mentions white Jesus, like, wait, how many Jesus are there? He's like, oh, there's white Jesus, there's black Jesus, there's Mexican Jesus, there's Greek Jesus. He goes through all these Jesus.
Yeah. I like he's going, white Jesus is having a really good time right now.
No, but so that. But because they must have been driving for a while, because they get to the motel, and it's because it lines up where when he gets to the coffin, when he's dug enough to get to the coffin, he sees like the hole, the coins went right through the lid. We cut, and you can kind of see where this is going. He looks down, the body's not there. Cut to Shadow opening the motel door, and sure enough, there was his dead wife. Cliffhanger, boom. See you next week.
Yes, not particularly dead looking.
No, not. That said, though, I recognised her even more from Sucker Punch when I seen her at the end of this episode, and I shivered just a little bit because I wake up in a cold sweat thinking about my time with that movie.
So glad I've never had the misfortune.
I think we'll have to do an influx on it one day.
No, because then you have to watch it again, and you don't want to put yourself through that.
I don't know. It's like, will the joy of watching you in pain
Tell you what,
outweigh
here's
it?
a deal. I'll do Sucker Punch when you do a musical.
All right, then. That's never happening. So,
Moving on.
Moving on. No. So, I think, obviously, things are keeping very beautiful. And I think each thing on its own is working very well. I think that there's a little bit of flow and pacing, maybe issues creeping in with this episode.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think everything, if you take everything individually, scene by scene, it's pretty great. But when you look at it as a larger whole, as this is one episode, it does struggle a little bit.
Yeah. And I'm not sure how to even fix that necessarily. I don't have like an obvious suggestion.
Honestly, I think just when the bits before and after the middle are a bit more related and feel a bit more like the same story rather than completely separate chapters, I feel like it will flow much better, because I didn't feel it last week.
I didn't really feel it I didn't really feel it in the first two that much.
So I think the middle scene as of right now is always going to feel disconnected by its nature of being separate from everything else. But I think the before and after can feel like they flow much better depending on what the content is.
Yeah. I just think though they're eventually going to have to mix up with the structure, You know, if it's going to be opening 10-minute thing, first half of story, middle thing, second half of story.
I can see them holding that structure for this season and then shaking it up. Because obviously the
Maybe.
season's only 8 episodes.
Yeah. Although IMDb tells me 10, but I'm sure it's 8. But
I'm fairly certain it's 8.
I recall it being announced as 8, but we'll find out.
Yeah.
IMDb's
IMDb could
unreliable.
be just it's being screwy.
It's sketchy. But yeah, so that's given me a lot of new concepts again to kind of play with. I feel like I'm just as much in the dark as I was last week, admittedly. Outside of maybe having an inkling of what Shadow's power is, if he is himself a god, is he the god of weather? Does he control weather, or if he's not a god, does he just have this power because of the sister giving him the moon thing? But then again, if my argument stands correct, then the storm was already happening, so it's maybe something that is just in him already.
Yeah. So I just like to point out in general from past episodes, obviously now that Shadow's wife is there and she's not in a grave. Back in the first episode, as the grave was going down, you mentioned, like how it fell and it was awkward, and I thought that was a really nice moment because it's like, she just doesn't go down properly. She just doesn't want to die properly, and it worked nicely for me, that visual metaphor.
Alright, that's this week's American Gods. Let us know what you thought of the episode in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. You can help us out a little bit more than that as well if you go over to patreon.com/MellyFlissTV. There's some bonuses up there for some of our shows if you want to check it out. But no, that's us. So get us on Twitter at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. Individual Twitters are on the screen for everyday ramblings. If you happen to also be a fan of our reviews of not Breaking Bad. Well, what year am I on? Better Call Saul and Supergirl, they're likely both going to be a little bit later this week and not be up until Wednesday. We'll see what we can do, but it seems like that's going to be the case. So apologies for that. But no, that's us. So thank you very much for watching once again. Have you got any vanilla?